For Cybercrime Radio, I'm Heather Engel. This is Cybertide, a Cybercrime Magazine podcast series brought to you by Adlumin. Working to revolutionize the way organizations secure sensitive data, Adlumin finds the newest cracks being exploited and shines a light on correcting the issue in real time with expert guidance. To learn more about our sponsor, visit adlumin.com. That's ADLUMIN.com. Today I'm talking with Mark Sangster, Vice President and Chief of Strategy at Adlumin. Mark, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Heather. It's great to be back. Always fun conversations.
Yeah. Well, it's the end of 2024, and that means it's time for all the year-end lists and summaries. I personally can't wait for my Spotify Wrapped. I don't know what you might be waiting on, but what are some of the year-end activities that you're looking forward to, Mark?
Yeah, of course, it's the time for all the reports to come out, tell us all about what we saw in 24 and what we think we're going to see in the future. And so far, it's been a pretty busy year. And honestly, I think with the election cycle kind of coming up on the transfer of the administration, I think, on the cyber side, we're going to see a lot of interesting things occur over the next 12 months.
As you mentioned, in the cyberspace this year, we saw the rise of AI. We saw more ransomware with bigger payouts. We saw a lot of attacks on the supply chain. What was the most notable thing for you this year?
So for me, I think we've seen kind of the aftershocks of the different, sort of physical or kinetic type of conflict that we've had around the globe, right? So, the Ukraine war is going into its third year now, something along those lines. And certainly we saw an increase in or spike in attacks on things like Ukrainian infrastructure. And then some of that bled over into the West. Let's say a DMZ been created between, sort of the BRICS type of countries and the NATO type of countries. We saw increases again with Iran in response to the conflicts going on in the Middle East right now. And I think that kind of thing is going to continue. And it's an important point to make here is, I've said this, in my books before, right? And No Safe Harbor and Cyber Conscious Leadership that's coming up is, there's no concept anymore of, civilians and combatants, or non-combatants. It's just everybody's the same. Everyone's a free target. There's no concept of military, business is considered to have a military value, I suppose, in attacking. So, that means dental practices and small banks and law firms and manufacturers in Mississippi and things like that that feel a long way from a battlefront in the Middle East are certainly in the crosshairs of these types of nation states.
And you make a really interesting point, too, that us personally are also considered targets, right? Even as far back as 10 years ago, when we were part of the OPM breach, all of our personal information was out there. And what was that done? That was being used to make specific people targets for obtaining leverage from some of these other companies. So you bring up a great point there. What are some of the most significant cyber threats that organizations should be preparing for in 2025?
Yeah. So obviously there's still the, like I said, the nation state driven kind of things like ransomware attacks, right? I mean, I think that kind of thing is going to continue. But what I'm also seeing too is I think a return more to the sort of the data theft, intellectual property types of attacks that you see, that are often more attributed to, say, China as an example. I think those things are going to increase, and the sophistication, as usual, is going to increase in, sort of two broad categories. The one, of course, is the social engineering side. So like think back to MGM and, the help desk type of attack, right? Where the criminal, the adversary pretends to be someone with administrative privileges. They can't get their VPN or their MFA to work. And so they call into a help desk and they're able to socially engineer that poor person into surrendering whatever information, resetting their credentials, things like that, that gets them in. So, more sophisticated kind of attacks. The second side of it is AI. And I'm not trying to like over rotate. For example, I've been showing this for a while now. Microsoft Labs came out with a technology called VASA 1 and VASA 2. It's VASA, and you can just Google it. But this is effectively real-time generation of video and audio based on simple sample clips. So for example, they could go onto your LinkedIn page and pull your headshot, and then they could find anywhere where you've spoken. Like our podcast here, they grab a 3-second snippet of audio, and from that, they can sample it. And it's not just, basic video, but effectively it's generating it real time. So you and I could be having the conversation, but you're not seeing my face. You're seeing some senior administrator's face or a politician or a celebrity's, and we can converse right in real time because the kind of the latency or the lag in the generation from, the raw video of me converting it into, whatever my persona or my costume is not humanly discernible. So you might even just think it's, look, it's bandwidth lag or something if it took me a second to respond. And so I think that's where it gets really, really hard until somebody starts to generate some kind of detection algorithm that kind of goes, wait a minute, this has the hallmarks of this has been photoshopped, in old parlance. And that's going to help. But otherwise, that takes away a lot of our things like secondary authentications. Like before I transfer this funds, my insurer says I must pick up the phone on any kind of banking change and validate with a person. Well, crap, if I'm a really good bad guy,
Mhm.
I'm sitting waiting for you to do your job and give me a call. And when you do, I'm going to pretend to be Heather and change my wire transfer information and off I go.
We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsor.
Adlumin Inc. provides enterprise-grade security to mid-market organizations. Its security operations platform and managed detection and response services combines all your data into one view to illuminate security risks and accelerate security workflows. Security teams are often stretched thin and are faced with increasing threats to respond to like ransomware and data theft. Adlumin's patented technology simplifies these challenges by providing organizations with machine learning detection and automated response capabilities to halt threats quickly. The platform also includes threat hunting, automated incident response, vulnerability management, honeypots, darknet exposure monitoring, compliance reporting and monitoring, and more. Join the conversation and see how Adlumin can enhance your security program without increasing your workload. Visit adlumin.com.
And now back to the podcast.
So you mentioned a few things. What are some evolving risk mitigation tactics that you like and would recommend?
A lot of this is like, do the basics still,
Mhm.
right? And it's
Yeah.
kind of the three little pigs kind of theory, right? About huffing and puffing, and you want the brick house. And I think that's the set of the point. So, fundamentals in place, right? Proper password hygiene, follow the NIST standards, right? About complexity, not constant reach changing, and all those sorts of things that force people to save it in Excel file called passwords. And multi-factor authentication, using a VPN, for people logging in remotely. But then on the backside, right, just doing all the basic administrative stuff, right? Least privilege, segmentation. If you can do those things, all you're doing is slowing down the bad guy. I'm not trying to say they can't get through that gauntlet of defenses, but what it does is it creates this sort of laundry list of subtle little activities, the inferential signs is what I call them, right? Implicit would be, hey, that's known as antivirus, and your next gen AV kicks in and blocks it. But these are the things that are more subtle. And it gives you that opportunity to start to go, hang on, how can Mark be on a call with Heather right now, but he's also apparently on the other side of the globe doing something else? That doesn't make sense. So when you start to see the kind of the signs and symptoms of something suspicious, it gives you that opportunity to stop it before it gets to later stages in an attack cycle. Like, if we use the MITRE framework as an example, that's the kind of stuff that's going to do it. So it really is, think about, I used bad guys earlier and you like that. Well, we need the good guys. We need the same sort of talent and skill sets just on our side, really effectively figuring out how to return the ball when those guys lob it at us.
Well, I think you make a lot of really great points here. We talked a little bit about AI, some of those risk tactics. Any final thoughts or predictions for 2025, or any final thoughts on 2024?
Yeah, I think 2024, frankly, just seemed to be sort of a continuation of more of the same. Just, I almost call it, you think in technology, you get like the TikTok, the tick is the massive change in a new technology, the new iPhone or something like that. And then the talk is, well, we just sort of, optimize what we have. And then we kind of go into another jump kind of evolutionary step. And so 24 is kind of in that. I think 25 is going to be the nastier year. And the one that, I'm worried about is, again, more on the geopolitical stage, is the alignment or the lining up of, the kind of the battlefronts between the BRICS kind of countries that are being more overt about their activity, and then the Western, Five Eyes kind of countries that are still sort of sitting back. And so I think that's where we're going to see a ramp up. And, I'm not sure what the right answer is here, but, I could also see the West deciding like enough's enough. We're going to start attacking you in a similar methodology, which is just, it's the arms race, right? It's just going to be an escalation. And so I think we're kind of, that's the sort of thing we're going to see, and maybe we'll see sort of social engineering 3.0. 1.0 was the going after granny for their tax returns and their photos and paying a small ransom. 2.0 was understanding businesses and industry, and I think 3 is going to go back to going after personalities, right? So not an individual, but understanding you're the CEO or you're the senior person in this company. We know you're insured up to X for a cyber attack. We know your company has X amount of money in the bank. you're only going to cover so much of this. Well, guess what? Here's the compromising photographs, the questionable information or private information. The school, where do your kids go to school? What time do they get
Mhm.
picked up and dropped off? And we've seen this sort of thing before. So I think that sort of return to personalized extortion as a way of sowing fear is something we're going to see in the coming year. So buckle up.
That was a downer note to end on. Any good things that you see coming next year?
Yeah, I think I do. I think on the defensive side, cybersecurity is still top of mind. It's certainly over the last few years permeated the board and the executive level of companies, which I think is great. So we've gone from this, they didn't really know that there was something to deal with. Now they understand that it's a fiduciary responsibility. They sort of understand the impact of their business. So now it's kind of honing, right? So from our perspective, I feel like the message has gotten through, and that's great, right? Because we've done a poor job, I think, up till now, of sort of learning vicariously from these attacks that have occurred. And now that we've got people's ear, now that they're listening, I think we've got a good chance to sort of, like I said, up our game, particularly on the commercial side and the corporate side, where we know the sort of government's kind of been doing this for a while now. And that's good, right? The fact that they aren't sort of hiding under those misconceptions like, we're too small, we're in, some place Russia would know doesn't exist, or we have nothing we're stealing, all that kind of stuff, right? I feel like those sorts of things, those bricks in the wall are starting to crumble, which, is half the battle, right? Knowing the problem.
Yeah.
So, I do feel like we'll see a positive upswing in the way that companies protect themselves.
Okay, there we go. That's a better note to end on.
Absolutely. 'Tis the season, right? We should be a bit more cheery.
'Tis the season. Mark, thanks as always for being on the podcast.
Oh, my pleasure, Heather.
For Cybercrime Radio, I'm Heather Engel. Cybertide is a Cybercrime Magazine podcast series brought to you by Adlumin. Working to revolutionize the way organizations secure sensitive data, Adlumin finds the newest cracks being exploited and shines a light on correcting the issue in real time with expert guidance. To learn more about our sponsor, visit adlumin.com. That's ADLUMIN.com. And for more of our media, visit cybercrimeradio.com.